Hello and welcome back to our first news show of the feature show this academic year. I'm your host, Jwaria Tanvir, and I'm pleased that we have our first show starting off with a Careers in Teaching show. This was the first show we kicked off the features show with last year, so it only seemed right for us to start off with it again this academic year. We're going to hear from teachers local to our town discussing their journeys into teaching and what inspired them to enter the field. In the first half, you will be joined by myself, along with Rachel Taylor, who is the Secondary SCITT Lead at Chiltern Training Group, Saarah Hussain, a current maths teacher, and Minhajur Rahman, a current trainee teacher. In the second half, you will be joined by my co-host, Amma Razem, who will be speaking with Raza Ali, Head of School at the Chalk Hills Academy. Please do stay tuned for what is going to be a great show. I want to first welcome Rachel, Saarah and Minhaj for joining us on the first show, on the feature show that we've done this academic year. So a very warm welcome to Rachel, Saarah and Minhaj. This time last year, I was actually a guest on the show, so it's quite nice to return hosting it this year alongside my co-host, Amma. Saarah, if I start off with you, you and I were both trainees last year, and it's quite nice because we were on this journey together where we did our training together here at Trainee Girls, and we're now both working here at Trainee Girls. But you actually did your undergrad in history. So what was it that inspired you, or who was it that inspired you, Saarah, to actually go into teaching and becoming a maths teacher?
So in terms of history, I've always been really passionate about history, but since I was 16, I've tutored maths and English. And when I was in my second year at uni, I actually applied to a different training provider to teach maths, just because for me, maths is about problem solving. I enjoy teaching it, whereas with history, it's more kind of sort of a passion, and I enjoy learning it. So I think for me, I always kind of thought if I did teach, it would be maths. There's a right and a wrong answer. There's a method to be taught, and I feel like I just feel a lot more comfortable teaching maths than I would teaching history.
Okay, lovely, thank you. And Minhaj, I'm sure you've had a very warm welcome from the CTG family and from your placement school, which is Denby. So same question to you, Minhaj. What was it that actually inspired you to become a teacher? Because I know you do quite a few things on the side as well.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's all happened so quickly. I mean, to think it's been, 4 weeks into teaching and getting into the whole thing. It's like time goes so quickly. I mean, when I had to think about this question earlier, it had me, I had my thinking cap on and really had me reflecting on why I decided to take this journey of becoming a teacher. And I mean, Jwaria, like you said, from the little chat we had earlier, like I had, had my fingers in a few different pies, if you want to say, and, doing all sorts of different things like competing in martial arts and wanting to pursue that as a career, to getting into business, to, my degree in marketing, advertising marketing, to having a few options out there for me. And so deciding to get into teaching was something, I mean, I would say I kind of fell into after taking up a role as a PE teacher last year in Al Hikmah, which is a private school. I found, I found, myself within that role to say, it was really good. I really enjoyed taking part into adding some sort of worth or benefit to the life of a young person. And the satisfaction essentially I got from that was very different. And it was something I thought, okay, this could be a more purposeful job for me that I can pursue.
Okay, amazing. And it sounds like you're quite a busy guy with all the extra bits that you do on the side. So how are you finding the work-life balance so far with the balancing the teacher training and everything else you've got going on?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I would say this is something I've worked a lot on in the past, more so a year or 2 years ago. I was more managing my time and, just so I can kind of fit in everything. So I haven't really fully let go of everything else. So it's even more important for me that I manage my time so that, I can, not only make sure I teach, teach in the best way I can, but to also make time for training, for business, for whatever I do on the side, and also my own time in terms of development and studying. So So I would definitely say time management is the absolute, the must-need skill, not only as a teacher, but just as a busy person.
Absolutely. And I did also see from Twitter that the current cohort of trainees actually went to Linslade. And I have to admit, it did make me a bit jealous. And I'm sure Saarah can relate to me on this. But one of the things that we didn't get to experience was having those Friday central training sessions at external providers and external schools to just really grasp the identity of each school in our town. Rachel, I'm sure you are very pleased that there has been some sense of normality returned to the training course. For anyone who's listening who may be considering teaching, Rachel, could you describe for us how the Chiltern Training Group's course is structured?
Yeah, definitely. So basically, obviously, we make sure that our programme is rich in pedagogy and evidence-based research, but training for CTG in particular, we're able to tap into our schools within the trust, but also our wider partner schools as well, in terms of the experienced facilitators. Often those that are currently sat in leadership positions, whether that's middle leaders or senior leaders, and they are able to pass on the kind of tried and tested workable strategies that still work in the classroom as well. So having that kind of blend of both is a really valuable part of our course structure. And just to kind of touch on your point there about the offsite central training at Linslade, it was wonderful on Friday to get back to some sort of form of normal. And the trainees, and Minhajur might want to input there, really found it a useful experience, because so that again we feel is a very valuable part of our course, the fact that we're actually able to go off-site, deliver our central training sessions that take place on a Monday for primary but a Friday for secondary, and actually then have the opportunity to see learning in action as part of a learning walk. We describe it as a learning walk, and they get to observe, and there'll be a particular focus. So for instance, on Friday, really tapping into the fact that Linslade is a middle school, and they have year 5 and 6, as well as year 7 and 8. So we could look at that difference in terms of Key Stage 2 versus Key Stage 3, and the transition, and compare and contrast the changes or different approaches to lessons, but not just the differences, equally the similarities. So in terms of our basic core structure, we kind of entwine 3 aspects of training. We have our central training, which is where the kind of theory, the pedagogy gets delivered to both our primary and secondary trainees. Throughout the year, periodically, we bring both phases, so both primary and secondary, together, and they have joint training. We see that as a really valuable part, because often they've got excellent experiences to share across the primary and secondary. And then we also have the subject practice sessions for secondary, and they have a subject lead, and they'll attend twilight sessions once a week in their subject specific area. For primary, it's dovetailed into the Monday central training. But what's really important and is at the heart of our training is the school-based training, and working with such a wide range of excellent partner schools. 80% of the training is in school with that hands-on experience, very supported through a mentor and a professional tutor, so that they're actually observing good practice, able to share good practice, discuss with professional experts within school as well, and really have that kind of professional dialogue going on all the time, and then having that opportunity to apply what they've gained in terms of knowledge of teaching and experiment and explore that within their own practice within the classroom, and also taking opportunities to, even before they practice it live in the classroom, having that opportunity to practice it in a kind of low stake environment, which is important as well. So our course is very developmental. I mean, it was lovely to hear Saarah and Minhajur's different journeys into the start of their teaching career. It's always lovely to hear that from all of our trainees, and that's really important to us, because we really do take on board that people come in at different starting points, and we make sure that we kind of tailor and make a personalised and bespoke programme for each individual, really. And then it's a very developmental programme. Ultimately, the end goal is gaining QTS, which is qualified teacher status, meeting the teacher standards, but having that developmental journey up until that point is how we shape our programme. And I just think it's a really supportive approach. You spoke of the CTG family. Hopefully yourself and Saarah and Minhaj, to a certain extent, with only 5 weeks in on the course, have started to feel that there is that real personable touch to the CTG programme, having that mentor, that professional tutor in school, but equally beyond that, you get a subject or a coordinator who looks after you. And then there's myself and Marcus Ray, who's the primary SCITT lead, and a wealth of other people behind the scenes supporting our trainees as well.
Brilliant. Thank you, Rachel. And I think Saarah and I can both agree on what you said there about the support. And that is a huge strength of CTG, the immense and constant support received over the year. And I will come back to that. But before I do, Minhaj, how was your experience at Linslade on the Friday Central Training Session? Quite nice to go to a school that's different to your placement school, because you're at Denby, which is a high school.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely a different experience. So going out of town, first of all, stepping into a different environment, where the culture of the school is different, and even the culture of the society is different, and obviously the layout of the school, having a middle school, the different years. So it was definitely 100% a really good experience, because I kind of got to see how how teaching is more so adjusted in different settings. So walking around the school, speaking to some of the teachers, even the students were amazing, and the whole experience in itself was really good and more eye-opening, seeing the different styles of teaching. So an experience like that was definitely one I didn't actually expect to receive from the program. So it was more so by surprise, if you want to say. So it was good, getting to pick up different professional practices and even starting to apply them to your own teaching.
Okay, nice. So like a nice pleasant surprise for you then. Saarah, we've been speaking about the support that we receive from CTG, and as someone who's just been through the training process, just like with any career, there are highs, but there are also challenges. And what would you say was one of your challenges during your training year, and how would you describe the support you received from CTG to help you with that?
I think for me, the biggest challenge during my training year was just kind of like the work-life balance, like you were talking about earlier. And I remember at one point, I think I mentioned to Rachel that I was kind of feeling a bit anxious and a bit overwhelmed with how much we had going on. And I remember it was Ramadan and we had a few deadlines, and the amount of lessons we were teaching had increased. And I remember just vaguely mentioning it to Rachel. And my professional tutor at school came up to me the next day. I was in school and she was like, "Oh, how are you getting on?" And we spoke about it. We had a meeting, talked through what's going on, how to prioritize. And then my mentor and me had a similar meeting during our mentor meeting. And I think that kind of little anecdote really shows you kind of the support you do receive from CTG, because I kind of just mentioned it to Rachel as a passing comment almost, that I'm just feeling a bit overwhelmed, and that had kind of gone back to my professional tutor who's in my school and to my mentor. And especially when it's remote, you kind of almost don't expect that, but it really did show me that CTG is quite supportive and they're really invested in the people. And I think that's what makes CTG quite different from other training providers, is that it is quite personable. You kind of get to know the leads, even remotely. You kind of build a rapport and you kind of build them relationships and support networks that are really, really important.
Brilliant. Thank you for sharing that. And I think what really stood out for me there is, yes, it was during a remote period of time, but it just goes to show that there is still that strong communication between the team at CTG and every placement school the trainees are at. And that is a huge strength of the training provider. Rachel, if I go back to you, you've been doing this role of being the secondary SCITT leader for quite a few years now, if I'm not mistaken, and you must have seen trainees year upon year enter the field and achieve lots of success. And an example that comes to mind for me is Bianca Fox, who was also here at Chiltern Girls. Not too long ago was she a CTG trainee, and she's gone off to become head of department now. And that must be something you've seen quite a lot, Rachel, with the trainees you've supported and mentored. Describe what it's like for you, Rachel, when you see all of those trainees you've helped go on to achieve amazing success in their careers.
Great question. I mean, that's basically one of the key reasons why I love working in the initial teacher training sector, and equally with early career teachers as well, because you do see them and you support them at the start of their teaching career, and you know, just within that 1 year of training you see people flourish at different points. You know, it's not to say that everybody makes progress at the same rate and what have you, and to go on that kind of professional journey with the trainee teacher is just such a wonderful experience, and that's what I love about that role. And in terms of, you know, seeing the trainees gain QTS and then move into the local schools, and then moving into leadership, it is just wonderful to be able to see that as well. So, I mean, I can take some examples, first-hand examples of where I've seen a trainee, for instance, see something in central training, aspects of it have resonated with them, and then they've gone away and adapted it and made it fit for purpose for them and their classes. And then we've been able to, or myself at CTG, been able to incorporate that into a small example of them kind of, you know, leading the way within the training program itself. We've also had trainees, for instance, who have had expertise within the education sector. So one worked very heavily with in a SEND department, and so they actually were able to plan and deliver a session which the trainees took a lot away. And then when you see that beyond the training year, when somebody gets that first kind of teaching and learning responsibility and what have you, you know, that is excellent, because one of the, you know, aspects of my role that I take very, very seriously is you are looking to recruit quality teachers within the local area, within Luton and the surrounding areas. And but not only for that recruitment, but actually to train them and see them move on so that they're retained within this profession, so that, you know, children are able to get that high quality learning and see that impact in the classroom as well. So yeah, I can remember Bianca as well. She obviously went on to be an NQT at Chiltern Girls with yourself, and I too have heard that she's moved on to get that first head of department role. So that's wonderful, and we do try and build that into our program as well. So when our facilitators visits periodically throughout the year, we always look to see if they're happy to share their career journey as well, because all of the different pathways, you know, there's not one set traditional way, and it's just nice for them to see the different professional journeys available to them.
Amazing, thank you, Rachel. Minhaj, if I come back to you, you are at the start of your teacher training year, and you're on this journey, I suppose, in trying to figure out the sort of teacher you are or want to become, and figuring out what works for you, what doesn't, with you and your students. If we turn back the clock to when you were in school, what sort of teachers inspired you and showed those traits and values that you admire and you now want to portray in your teaching?
Oh, you're bringing me back on one. I mean, in all honesty, when I was in school, it was the complete opposite for me. I would think, you know, why on earth would anyone want to be a teacher? Because, you know, the workload is so much. So much marking. Then you've got to deal with the detentions, behavior. So, I mean, the thought crossed my mind, and I was like, no way, teacher, me, never. So it's quite, you know, ironic how now I'm in this role, you know, about to become a teacher. But no, definitely along the journey, I've had many teachers, many superheroes, as one teacher would say. You know, Keiko Kabi in sixth form, if any of you know, Sufyan, which is also a part of the CTG family, Alex Igori, you know, as well as many others. The list can go on. But you know, these teachers had not so much taught me about you know, about teaching in specific, but more so, for me, they were just more very genuine, relatable and essentially real. And for me at that moment, in my school journey, I very much needed, role models or figures, like these teachers to kind of, show me that teachers are human as well. Sometimes you'd think teachers are some sort of aliens. They have their own way. They're always strict or whatever it is. So, that side of them, the genuine side, was what really, pushed me to actually progress with my life and think about other options and do other things and kind of give more impact and give back to people. So that was definitely, there were definitely qualities, just being genuine, relatable, and I hopefully, want to also relay the same back to my students and create a society of, young men who can lead and, be real role models for others.
Brilliant. It was really nice to hear quite a few familiar names there as well. I've also seen that you've joined Twitter recently, which is really fantastic in connecting with educators and sharing of resources. Just like with any social media, though, you see the highs, but you also see some of the low points people have in their teaching career, and you might come across things like how people want to leave the career. Rachel, if I come to you, you've been teaching for 17 years, not that any of us could have guessed that, but that speaks a lot of good things about the sector. What would your advice be to someone like Minhaj and every other trainee, and even ECTs like myself and Saarah, for coping with those low points in our careers, because we will get them?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it would be wrong to say that, it's a wonderful career, but we all know that it takes a lot of hard work in the classroom and what have you. But when you see it having real impact to students and their education, that's what keeps us in this profession. So in terms of kind of advice, I think in all careers, there's that kind of high and low sort of cycle, and teaching's not, is no exception to that. So in terms of, there's so many different contexts and different scenarios, so there's loads of advice, but I think in terms of those general lows, it's thinking about those kind of quick wins in terms of stepping back and kind of surveying how you can kind of manage that workload at that point in time, if that's the issue in the here and now. Making sure that, you think about being the magpie. We often said that in central training over the years, that you're not expected to reinvent the wheel. So it's really, really important to collaborate. And when it is getting tough, make sure you communicate that. Have that kind of professional sounding board that you can go to kind of like chew the fat if you need to and what have you. And also I think it's really important at times like that to just take that time to step away, take stock, reflect, and actually remind yourself of why you went into the profession. And I think all of us would admit that it's because actually we really care about the quality of the education of young people, and we want to be part of that. So sometimes the problem can seem quite big, but actually with the support of others, or in your own reflections, if you break it down into kind of like bite-sized chunks, just like we do in the classroom in terms of problem solving and what have you, then actually a problem shared is a problem halved firstly, but then actually being able to break it down, it then suddenly feels manageable. And I think it's really important to always look to evolve your own practice. So take on the advice of your kind of professional colleagues when they're trying to kind of like support you in that. And thinking of just about those kind of quick wins, that as you move into the profession and you gain more and more experience, you'll see ways that other people do things, and just learn and have that kind of collaborative ethos.
Brilliant. Thank you, Rachel. Saarah, we are approaching the end. We've got just over a minute left. Any last bit of advice for you to any of the current trainees?
I think my main advice would be kind of get involved with everything. I know it seems like there's a lot going on and there's a lot to do over the year, but kind of I remember last year getting involved with the working party, getting involved at school with lots of different little projects. And I think they are the things that you remember, I think, at the end of the year. So it's really important to just kind of throw yourself in there and just remember to enjoy it.
And Jawari, can I just add to that actually,
Absolutely.
in terms of Saarah, because she's just literally hit the nail on the head. I think when you have those low moments and stuff, walking into the classroom, and it will be the class that you're not expecting it to happen with, and they would literally just bring a smile to your face, and you'll come out of that lesson, you're actually, they've just turned my mood around. Actually, they've just kind of, you know, lifted my spirits and what have you. And the role is so varied, and you're working with so many different children or students in the classroom. It's really lovely that they don't realise the impact that they can have on us sometimes, in terms of the relationships and the rapport that you build. And sometimes, you know, you can wake up on a Monday morning and you're feeling a little bit like you got the morning blues, and then you have that lesson and they just put a spring in your step.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. We have approached the end of this first half of the show. I just want to say a massive thank you to Rachel, Saarah and Minhaj for taking the time to join us today on the feature show. Listeners, we are approaching the end of the first half and going off to a break now, but please do stay tuned for the second half of the show, where we're going to be joined by my co-host Amar Azam and Head of School at Chalk Hills, Raza Ali.